Deuteronomy 28. The reason I brought it up again and again, because it's sort of like their John 3:16. You know, if there were Hebrew Israelites at a football game, you'd see them with 28:68, right? That's what you would see instead of the John 3:16 sign, because that's how much they dig it. Now, we need to look at it again, and I'm going to briefly show you something I haven't shown you before, and just reminding you. Deuteronomy 28, the beginning says, Israel, you'll be blessed if you do this. And it's a short section. It's almost like God knew they probably wouldn't obey very much. And the second section is, if you don't, you'll be cursed. And the curses, if you go through the Old Testament, all of them happen in the pages of the Old Testament. Some are more explicit than others. Read these curses. One of them says, you're going to eat your kids, basically. Remember that happened? So a woman says, hey, we're starving here. We're under siege warfare. This is the Bible, by the way. Today we eat your kid, then tomorrow we eat my kid. Sound like a good deal? Shake on it. They eat his kid, and then the next day she hides her kid. Clever lady, right? And so this was a grievance. This is in the Bible. And that's not the only example of this kind of stuff that happened, right? Oh, you're going to plant, and then someone else is going to reap the harvest. What was Gideon raised up for? Those Midianites would come around crop time and say, give me that. Right? That's why he was threshing his stuff underground, remember? Hey, man of valor. What's that? Right? Man of valor hiding out. Okay, so this stuff happened, but sometimes the key one, you may not know as much where it happened. Verse 68, the very last curse. And the Lord, every time you see all caps, that's Yahweh, and Yahweh will bring you back, so you have had to already been to this place, in ships to Egypt. Okay, they were in Egypt, they're going back to Egypt. The way the Hebrew Israelites spin it is, Egypt means house of bondage, they're going back into some form of slavery. This is actually talking about the transatlantic slave trade. A journey that I promise that you should never make again. What God is saying here is, I'm going to de-exodus you. It's almost like I'm reversing the Exodus. Do you see? That's going to be one of your punishments. Think about it, they're leaving Egypt, and he's like, I'm going to de-exodus you. I promise you should never make again, and there you shall offer yourselves for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, but there will be no buyer. That's a modern translation. It's more correct because in the Hebrew it's reflexive, indicating selling yourself, which would be like an indentured servant. That's why it's tough that there's no buyer, because what it's showing is you want to sell, all you got left, you're destitute, so you try to sell yourself, you can't even hardly do that. The KJV says you'll be sold. There'll be no buyer. So if a person went more with that interpretation, which they usually do, okay, then if it says there's no buyer, that doesn't fit the transatlantic slave trade. That's why they kept on stealing people, which is punishable by death in the Old Testament, by the way, because it was profitable because there were buyers. They'll say, oh, well, buyer's metaphorical there. It means no one will redeem you out of slavery. That's what it means. They say it means no one will redeem you out of your slavery. They're going to have no earthly savior. They kind of make it metaphorical. Not like a purchase situation. Say John Brown tried, Nat Turner tried, they tried, but no one, But the thing with this is it's clearly in a transactional purchase goods situation. The context lets you know. There are some examples, but if you go to immediate examples, especially in this kind of context, it does have to do with transaction. You can find examples of something being used in that way, but there's no reason why it should be used that way there.
These people can't let you have anything. They steal your music. They steal your culture. They steal your food. They steal everything from you. You see, they take everything. They take your land, and they put other people in your land. They take your name. They put those Ish people over there in our land, and now they running around calling themselves Jewish. You see, you can't have anything for yourself. They gotta rob you of everything: your heritage, your nationality, your name, everything. They can't let you have anything. So they won't even let you have slavery. You see, they won't even let you have that. They trying to take, CRT out of schools. They don't want you. They don't want your children to know who they are, according to the scriptures. You see, according to the Bible. They didn't mind making all these movies, 12 Years a Slave, all these different movies, Roots, You know, I grew up watching Roots in the 80s. They didn't mind putting all these movies on TV, you know, so that they could pride themselves on your destruction, you know. And when you go to school, you know, now everybody's looking at you, you know, like, yeah, we had y'all in captivity, you know. But check it out. So now in 2025, since, you know, the Israelites have tied slavery to the Bible in Deuteronomy 28:68, which proves who God's children are according to the slave trade. You know, God said that you would go back into slavery again. You would go back into Egypt again on ships. You see? So now they have to erase that history. You know, they can't let you have that to yourself. They can't let you have slavery to yourself. Now they say, oh, every race of people went into slavery at one point. Stop lying. Stop the lies. You see, they might have been a few, you know, people that was in prison, you know, for doing something wrong. But as a whole, your whole race of people, your whole nation was not going into captivity. You see, that never happened to anyone else except, you know, you so-called blacks and Native Americans, you Hispanics, you know, so-called Hispanics and Native Americans, because you're really the tribe of Israel. You're really the nation of Israel according to the scriptures. You see, all of us suffered slavery at one point or another. You know, when the conquistadors came over and conquered your people, you know, when the Native Americans was being rounded up, you know, they all went on slave ships. You see, this is how we know, you know, who are the Israelites according to the scriptures. All right, let's go to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28. Chapter 28, verse 68. Let's read it for ourselves. You know, you Christians, you need to learn how to read these things for yourself. You see, because all these, look, all these curses in this book, in Deuteronomy 28, it only pertains to one people, the Israelites. You see, look at verse 50. It says, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall have no regard the person, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. See, the Lord said he's going to send a nation of people against us that won't care whether you're young or old. They were killing all of us indiscriminately. He didn't care. You see, he still don't care. You see 65-year-old women getting body slammed on the ground, you know, by the police. You see 15-year-old girls in schools. The cops come in the classroom and body slam your daughter. You see, on the concrete. So they don't care how old or how young you are. You see, let's look at some more of these curses in here. Let's look at verse 32, because he said that all those curses already happened. They already happened in the Old Testament. It's not pertaining to the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade. You see, look at verse 32. It says, thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people. Who did that happen to during slavery? And thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for thee, for them all the day long. And there shall be no might in thine hand. That happened to black people. That happened to Hispanics. That happened to the Native Americans. You see, right here in America, on this side of the earth. It's not talking about the Old Testament. You see? So don't let the devil confuse you. All right, y'all. So when we read Deuteronomy 28:68, you know, where it says, you shall go into captivity again, or go back to Egypt again with ships. See, that's the key word. You know, anyone with a little, you know, understanding of history would understand that this happened to the so-called African Americans. You see, the so-called Native Americans also. You see, the Hispanic people went into captivity on ships. You see, but these apologists, they want to say that, you know, this happened back during the Old Testament. Josephus says, you know, Josephus, they love to go to Josephus. Josephus says they went back to Egypt, the literal Egypt, on ships. You know, regardless, they walked out of Egypt the first time. You know, they walked out of Egypt, you know, but they said we were on ships, you know, going back to Egypt. And Josephus says, you know, they went back to Egypt in chains. But how many? Was it the whole nation like it was the first time? Or was it maybe a couple hundred people went into captivity in Egypt? See, I don't care how many ships went back to Egypt on ships. You can't get around that this happened again in the 15th century, 16th century. You see, a group of people went back into slavery on ships. You see, I don't care how many ships went back to Egypt. This Most High says his punishment, his judgments is continual. It's like a circle. Let's get that. Let's go to the book of 2nd Ezra. We're in chapter 5, verse 42. It says, "And he said unto me, I will liken my judgment unto a ring." Unto a ring, meaning it's going to be continual. It's going to be perpetual. Like as there is no slackness of the last, even so there is no swiftness of the first. So it's going to continue to come back around again. You know, every time we came out of a captivity, we went right back again into another captivity. You see? So the apologist said this was fulfilled, this punishment, this judgment was fulfilled already in the Old Testament. You know, they go to Jeremiah, they go to all these different books, they go to Josephus, you know, but it never says in Josephus that, you know, we went on ships. It never says that. So when we come down here, let's read some of the other curses that they said only happened in the Old Testament. Verse 32, Deuteronomy 28:32 says, "Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long." So when did this happen? Did not our sons and daughters, while in captivity, they came and took our sons and daughters? You know, the mother didn't even get a chance to see her baby's face when it was born. They would rip the baby, you know, from her, and it was sold. You see, they would take it and sell it to somebody else as soon as it was born. You see, thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long. There was much tears, much lamentation, you know, when your son and daughters being ripped from your arms. And there shall be no might in thine hand. And the mother didn't have any might, you know, to say, no, you can't take my baby. You know, you can't take my child. You know, she didn't have any power to fight, you know, off these curses. So they say all these curses happened in the Old Testament. But what about that one? This happened during slavery. Let's get another one. Let's look at verse 30, the same book. It says, thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. So you've seen the movie Uncle Tom's Cabin. You've seen 12 Years a Slave. You've seen Roots, where a brother would get married, to a wife in captivity. They still honored being married, you know. And today in 2025, we can't uphold marriage. We don't think marriage is honorable. But during captivity, our people will still get married and honoring marriage. You see, a brother would get married to a wife, and the slave master would come and take the wife before he even consummated the marriage. You see, and have relations with his wife against her will. You see, on his wedding day. This happened to us, not just in the Old Testament. That happened over here on this side of the world. You see, thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. Thou shalt build an house. Who built the White House? The so-called African American slaves built the White House. The so-called African Americans built mansions on these plantations from Mississippi all the way to the Florida coast. They were building these slave plantation houses. Thou shalt build an house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. We wasn't allowed to sleep in the big house. We were outside in the shack. See, we were outside in the back of these big extravagant mansions, plucking corn. The thorns, when you pick cotton, the thorns go into your fingers. There was blood all over the cotton. That's what we were doing. We wasn't dwelling in the house with the slave master. Thou shalt not dwell therein. Thou shalt plant vineyards, and shalt not gather the grapes thereof. So this happened in modern times. I say modern times because this was in the 14th century, 15th century, when this stuff was happening, right here in America. We wasn't dwelling over in Egypt when this happened. Get an apologist to explain and tell you that this didn't happen, in America. You see, they try to explain away Deuteronomy 28:68, but what about this curse? All right, let's go to the book of Joel, chapter 3, verse 2, one of my favorite scriptures. Verse 2 says, I will also gather all nations, and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people. So all nations can be saved. That's false, because Messiah just said he's going to plead with all nations, and with them there for my people, his people, the blacks, Hispanics, and Native American people. All the other nations are going to be judged for what they did to us by taking us into captivity, for lying to us and telling us that Deuteronomy 28:68 already happened. The devil is a liar, a deceiver. So Messiah said he's going to plead with them, the other nations, for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations. They have scattered among the nations. See, it doesn't say, oh, we just went back to Egypt on ships and that's it. That was the end of it. No, we were scattered in all nations, among the nations, meaning here in America, Haiti, Brazil, South America, you know, Europe, China, you know, Middle East. We were scattered everywhere to the four corners of the earth. See, don't let a devil lie to you and tell you that the transatlantic slave trade was not a part of this curse. You are not the Israelites because the transatlantic slave trade wasn't pertaining to Deuteronomy 28:68. Don't let a demon lie to you in 2025. We can read now. So we were scattered among the nations and parted my land. They parted Israel. You know, there's people living in that land today that don't belong there. And they have cast lots for my people. See? So when in Deuteronomy 28:68, when it says no one will buy you, it says right here, they have cast lots for my people. That means you were sold. You see? Another lie the demon said, that we would be trying to sell ourselves into slavery. What? Who's going to sell themselves into slavery? There were slaves jumping off ships with their children so they didn't have to go into slavery. You see? See the lies? Nobody wants to be in slavery. No one's going to give up their freedom for a loaf of bread. That's nonsense. And they have cast lots for my people and have given a boy for a harlot. They sold him into prostitution. A young boy was being sold into prostitution. And these people, grown men, you know, they didn't care that he was underage boy. You see, they don't have any care for the young or the old. They have given a young boy for a harlot and sold a girl for wine. Same thing. A young girl was sold for a bottle of wine that they might drink. See? So don't let a demon apologist tell you that Deuteronomy 28:68 does not pertain to so-called African Americans living here and abroad in 2025. You are the Israelites. You are God's chosen people. We went into captivity for being rebellious and stiff-necked and listening to the devil, listening to the serpent. Just like Eve was beguiled in the garden, so it is today. We are still being beguiled by the serpent in 2025. Shalom.